So let's start. Warmly welcome everybody, especially our today's speakers, my dear friend Dr. Boba Fu, President of China Aid, and one of the main speakers, Mr. Wu Wang, and brother of a prominent Christian democracy leader. His brother was sentenced to life in jail. And also to Mrs. Xin Yu Li, the wife of a human rights defender, Li Mingxie from Taiwan, who is imprisoned in China. And we also devoted in Parliament here a resolution on his situation. We will battle for his release, of course. And also a warm welcome to our dear friend from Taiwan, His Excellency the Ambassador of Taiwan. Thank you for coming. I had to say and to apologize, one of the speakers on the poster is Mrs. Grace Gang, daughter of a prominent missing Christian human rights lawyer. Unfortunately, she was not able to come for serious health reasons linked to the enforced disappearance of her father. And can you add some words about her position in the situation? Yeah.
Because Mr. Lawyer Gao Zhisheng was again being in an enforced disappearance since last August, and his daughter Grace had been suffering recently with the real despair and depression. And the situation is too hard, too difficult for her to travel because in the past 8 months there's no single word from any government sources about the whereabouts of her father, Lawyer Gao Zhisheng, or his condition, or whether he's being charged or not, or if he's charged, what kind of charges he was filed against. So there's no word, no family member has ever heard. So that really is a very, very difficult situation to all the family members. So Grace is sorry that she could not come over to speak and share with all of you.
Thank you, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, a seminar on religious freedom and human rights in China. Why? The answer can, in the first instance, be quite simple because there is an upcoming new report on EU-China relations, and therefore that is, of course, useful and I think very needed, especially in this situation with the ideological drive of the CCP at the moment under President Xi Jinping. But that said, there's not only practical reason because I'm the rapporteur for this report EU-China and I know Dr. Boba Fu very well, and I must say every year there is an annual report on China's government persecutions of church and Christian in mainland China, well documented. I can advise you, you can download it from the website, very accurate and update. And Dr. Boba Fu was also invited some years ago to the official China delegation of the European Parliament, so he is coming here regularly. So thank you very much for your presence here. Second question is, of course, that what is also in my report that is very tense, and that is the so-called cross-strait relations. And I have written it down in my report that when you look at the development in the cross-strait relations, you see a prospering democracy in the Republic of China, although you, when you are very political correct, you should not say here the Republic of China, Taiwan, or there are even Chinese version of this name. And on the other side, you will see the growing economic power, but also the political power of the People's Republic of China. And when you read and studied very closely and you keep your eyes on it, what's going on is the new scholarly publications. For example, I think about the very good Mercator Institute in Berlin and other institute. It is quite clear that it is not only the economic future of Europe is at stake, but also the political future, because the Chinese influence is growing. And what does it mean, for example, and I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, that it has an impact on what academics, Confucius institutes and so on are saying about what's going on in China and what is in the propaganda and what is really going on. I'm quite honest, it is, here is a battlefield of course, it is a political battlefield of what's the precise condition of life in the People's Republic under Xi Jinping, but it's quite clear that there is more and more state surveillance. When, for example, I was some weeks ago, I was in Beijing, and what I learned about the situation at the moment in Xinjiang, and also by documents, it is really harrowing. But also, perhaps you have learned about the social credit system, that the party state is more and more controlling the whole life of every citizen. They try, of course, but it is, and it also has an impact, of course, on the relation between EU and China, let alone foreigners or European citizens who are also there, impact on their lives. So, and you see it in more and more publications that are scholars, especially scholars, academics that are urging politicians on the European side to make up their minds. China, the People's Republic of China has a strategy, and where is the European strategy? And at the same time, we should not forget the foundations of our society, civil rights, human rights. And therefore, I think it is very precious to speak this afternoon about religious freedom and human rights, especially because when you look at the facts, new religious regulations, since the 1st of February, a new white book on religion, so it's paying a lot of attention, and there's not by chance. We shall learn from you why the Chinese communists, who are so all-powerful, are so busy with Christians in Christian churches. Are they afraid or not? I think it is not by chance that they have such a close eye on it, and that they are promulgating so many documents. A last word for you, of course, last word was from me. I like to have an open debate. I was officially invited to the People's Republic of China some weeks ago, and I asked the Chinese embassy quite clearly. They asked me on the program, what are your wishes? And I said, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Christian, I should like to speak with the official, the party state sanctioned 3 church on all your documents and your policy towards churches, and also your involvement, not to say controlling church life. And he was looking at me and gazing and like a philosopher, like Confucius, and he said, okay. And my dear assistant, Walter van Luik, and I traveled to Beijing in the expectation that we, at our first day in the afternoon, we had a meeting with the representatives of the official church, the 3 sub-churches. And what happened, we learned from our EU embassy, who does a very good job also on human rights there, by the way, that it was skipped. It was skipped. So last week, I told you yesterday already, but I repeat again, it was Wednesday, we were sipping a cup of coffee in the members bar, and then I stumbled upon the gentleman, the counsel of the Chinese embassy here, who was quite impressed with the Chinese embassy here, and I stumbled upon him, and I said, hey, he said to me, how was your journey, how was your trip? I said, excellent, but I had one point to you. Why did you skip the very important meeting with the 3 sub-churches? And he was quite embarrassed. And then he said, but you are organizing this seminar by yourself. So it's quite updated. They're following you closely, Dr. Boba Fu.
Observing you.
But I don't see it. I warmly invited him, but I think the Chinese embassy is unfortunately not be present here for. Then you have a real open and honest debate. I give you the floor. We are listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Belda, for your long time wavering support and commitment and your dedication to the religious freedom, rule of law, and human rights in China and around the globe. I really deeply appreciate, I think, your effort, despite of all the blocks and difficulties in this political correct environment. I think have already made some difference. I think many those who are suppressed in China will forever be grateful to your effort, especially when we are full free. And ladies and gentlemen and friends, our colleagues in our delegation and our honorable ambassador, I'm so thankful to be here today to update you basically with what's going on the religious freedom and human rights and the rule of law in general in China, especially in the past 3 years under the Emperor Xi. Now we can formally call him Emperor Xi since he removed the term limits already from the Chinese constitution, formally last month. And here's something, I want to read just one paragraph for this UCA news. I just received it. It was released a couple of days ago. Here's what it said. After blocking minors from churches and sizing church-run kindergartens, Beijing's crackdown on Catholic and Protestant churches is intensifying in 7 dioceses out of 10 in China's central Henan province, with churches demolished and raided, as well as hundreds of Bibles and holy books confiscated. This is just released on April 20th. Dr. Belda and friends, without any exaggeration, I think today we can make this statement that the human rights, religious freedom, and rule of law situation in China has fallen into the worst condition that was not seen since the end of Cultural Revolution in 1976. It is not only just one religious minority was targeted. It was not only one aspect of human rights is targeted, such as freedom of assembly, in the Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao's time. It is not just these human rights and religious freedom violations happen in a regional, limited, provincial, local level, as the Chinese propaganda always want you to believe. It is across the board. For religious freedom, the persecution has extended not only to the traditionally called underground house churches, that means unregistered churches, but also extended to hundreds of thousands of the government-sanctioned so-called patriotic movement churches. By today, we can, according to our own well-documented account, over 2,000 crosses from the rooftop of over 2,000 government-sanctioned church buildings were forcefully demolished, removed, burned, and hundreds of churches were destroyed and bulldozed. And even last month, in March, one of the largest church in Taiyuan, in Shanxi province, were even diamondized. You have the hundreds of military police dispatched to a church building and they buried tons of dynamite. Is that the right word? Dynamite. and bombed the whole church. And the church became leveled all just within a couple hours, when hundreds of believers were detained. So this kind of crackdown is, as I just said, not only to those unregistered churches, not only to one religion, or denomination. As I just read, this is extended to the Catholic churches, both the underground Catholic Church that is faithful to the Vatican, and the official China's Catholic Patriotic Association churches as well. And in fact, according to this report, and we already got the interview of some of those priests who were taken away and being released. And this campaign is against any actually religious minorities that were deemed as a state political disability factor, such as the Tibetan Buddhists who are loyal to His Holiness Dalai Lama. The largest Tibetan seminary, the Buddhist seminary, is now in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. The president of Tibetan Buddhist seminary is a Communist Party leader, party secretary of that one city. And the persecution has also extended to Uyghur minorities. They are located predominantly in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And in the past few months, according to all well-documented accounts, it's estimated over a million Uyghur moderate Muslims were put into concentration camp. They are in the gulags right now. I'm so glad that my friend, Uyghur himself, Omar, is here with us. And I also urge you to really, sign that petition to urge the Chinese regime to have a little bit mercy, release those, who are arbitrarily detained and who are under enormous torture. We as a Christian organization, I'm a Christian pastor, but we're all for freedom of religious belief and for all. So just because, they are ethnically identified as a Uyghur minority and believe in the religion of Islam, they should not be subject for this kind of torture. And many, according to our interviews, we have in video and audio form, many of those who are in this so-called study camp, 学习营, it's a kind of brainwash camp. It's a forced, it's a totally coerced. All of those who are there have to wear a specially designed earphones, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were forced to listen to the Communist Party's revolutionary songs and brainwash propaganda. And many of them were already tortured to insanity, and some we already documented into death. So this is, of course, other minority groups such as Falun Gong, and they continue to receive this religious persecution. And during the Fu Jintao's time, they still at least tolerate those they called, worship at your own homes with a small number, with the purpose to read the scripture and pray. And now, after February the 1st this year, when this new law called the Regulation on Religious Affairs in China just took effect, it's the worst law ever seen since the end of the Cultural Revolution. According to this new regulation, you cannot even have the freedom to organize your own prayer meeting with your own family members in your home. In fact, the first day when this law took effect, we have interviewed and again documented that hundreds of thousands of Christian homes were being searched, house by house, led by the local party secretaries. what they're looking for. They're looking for any Christian signs on your wall, be it a cross, be it a little like a 对联, some maybe a poster with Christian words, and a Bible in the home, everything. As long as they see it as a religious nature, they confiscated everything from their homes. And some of them, the picture, the cross, were replaced with the Chairman Xi Jinping's portrait. And certainly, those of you who knew a little bit about the Cultural Revolution, China has entered into a new, maybe a mini version of Cultural Revolution. So this is a war against the FORB, the freedom of religion or belief. And the second war China under Emperor Xi has launched is the war against the rule of law. Since July 9th, 2015, over 300 Chinese human rights lawyers were detained or incarcerated, or many of them were even being tortured and sentenced. We have seen, of course, I just mentioned, lawyer Gao Zhisheng is a recent latest example of enforced disappearance. And after experiencing 8 years of non-stop, arbitrary detention, imprisonment, and tremendous kind of inhuman treatment and torture. And since July 9th, many of these lawyers suffered, if not more, this similar kind of torture, including being forced to take, the mysterious medications. And all of a sudden, all these lawyers who end up in the detention center has to take a kind of different pills, and all of them were called, you have high blood pressure. But we have documented many of these lawyers who took similar pills, and they developed symptoms of psychological collapse and mental disability, such as Li Chuanfu and his own brother, another brother, anti-death penalty Christian lawyer, Li Heping. They're all my friends, and after 2 years of torture, how their condition are now. Li Chuanfu is still suffering psychologically and mentally, and we have to provide some timely counseling for him as we're talking now. And his brother, Li Heping, who was a recipient of National Endowment for Democracy's America's National Democracy Award in 2008. After 2 years of torture, you can't really recognize him. His face, his hair became totally gray. And the other lawyer I want to mention is the lawyer Wang Quanzhang, who is a bold lawyer because, I speculate, because he refused to make a TV confession, even under torture. He has been declared or disappeared for over 1,019 days today. 1,019 days. Not a single word, not a single visitor from his family, nor from his legal attorney had ever been allowed to visit him. And his wife, one of the boldest ladies I have ever watched, Miss Li Wenzu, with their little young child, just last week, tried to walk to Tianjin, from Beijing to try to make a request. In the middle of this, supposed to be 16-day march to her husband's prison, and the Chinese security forces kidnapped her and abused her and took her and other women walking with her back to Beijing and put her under 24-hour house arrest. And even to buy vegetables is regulated. So this is a war against the rule of law. and maybe it's even against their own rule by the law, and it's totally arbitrary, it's a rule by the man now, under this maybe party-controlled state, not even a party state. I think it's now, according to President Xi, it's a party controls everything. And so this is a crisis. I think the other aspect I want to report to all of you is the war against religious education to the children and the students. Under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 18, it is the parents who has the preferred authority to choose their children's education according to their religious affiliation. And in the past few months after this law, or even before this law was passed and took effect, we have seen across the board in every province in China, these posters or party committee issued red hat documents instruct all the cadres around China, and some posters were put in front of every three-self church building, said, these 5 categories of people should not be allowed to enter into the church. They are including, the first one is students, the children under 18 years old, and civil servant, Communist Party members, and the military member of the military service. So these people, are they part of the citizens of the People's Republic of China? According to the Article 36 of the Chinese own constitution, it says, the Chinese citizens is guaranteed with freedom of religious belief. We don't need even to mention the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the Article 18. Chinese is even a direct violation of Chinese own constitution. So this is a war against the religious education of the children. So it is only becoming worse every day. My recommendation to you, Dr. Belda, and your colleagues at the European Parliament and the member states are this. Number one, I think it's time, for the European Parliament and the European Union to take a real stand on the basic universal values that is a foundation for this bloc. I think we can, continue to trade with China, do business with China, but we cannot trade our conscience. I think if we put these freedoms, freedom of speech, one Xinjiang, a guy, Mr. Zhang Haitao, was sentenced to 19 years last year for sending 205 Twitter messages after actually he has to climb the firewall, and 69 WeChat messages, and 13 photos he took on the Urumqi street. 19-year sentence. And this is really the Chinese own way, and the Communist Party's war against the universal values. So we can't ignore this. We can't continue, the business as usual anymore. And I also want to mention another recommendation is when the EU or the dialogue, member states, some of them, UK or Germany or the European Union, you have the annual human rights dialogue. I said this to the US Congress when I testified several times in the past few years. I said, it's useless, it's toothless, it's not effective, it's already proven. You can't separate human rights with other issues of the day. And you can't separate the abuse of labors when you are negotiating a trade deal. These are fundamental human rights issues. So I would recommend in every dialogue, bilateral or trilateral, multilateral, every dialogue of the EU and the member states have, the human rights should be at least one of the components inseparate from any other issues. It should be integrated So I advocate that during the Obama administration, when he initiated the strategic and economic dialogue, and the U.S. has been catching up. And I think I got some hint from the State Department last week when I met with senior officials there that I don't think the U.S. will be very enthusiastic to do more so-called human rights dialogue alone. It should be an integrated approach. And number three, I think the European Union diplomats in Beijing has been doing relatively a good job in monitoring the human rights abuses in China. But I would recommend them, to be more active and even proactive when these family members, when their families members are in prison, when they are finally sometimes allowed to even pay a visit to their to the prisoner of conscience of their family members. And isn't that necessary that to have the EU representative to invite the family members, even to have a quiet tea in the Starbucks, if they are not allowed to go to the diplomatic compound to avoid sensitivity. It's not really a matter of one meeting. It's a matter of how much we want to show our solidarity with those family of prisoners, to stand with them, to stand up, to those abusers. That enough is enough, and we want to be on the right side of history. So these are kind of my three, basic points of recommendations. And if there is time, I would recommend to have our Uyghur friend Omar maybe to at least have a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Fu. We have tonight's program. We have now 2 testimonies, and also I would like also to give you the floor. So we have 3. We have a small space for the discussion, but I think it is more important to have good information to read sync on it. So I will come to you directly. But first, we have the testimony of Mr. Bing Wu Wang, the brother of the prominent Christian democracy leader Bing Jiang Wang, who was sentenced to life in jail. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Belder. My name is Bing Wang. My brother was sentenced to life to prison in solitary confinement in Shaoguan prison, Guangdong province. The thing is happened like this. My brother was born in China. He was surgeon, become surgeon in 1971. He was the first student sent out by the Chinese government to study abroad since the Chinese Cultural Revolution. He was obtained his PhD degree in experimental medicine at the McGill University, Montreal, Canada. Subsequently, he gave up his medical career and decided to devote his whole life into Chinese democracy, rule of law, freedom, expression, and justice. And he said, medicine can cure a few patients, but it cannot cure the disease of a nation. So this is the driving force for him to do what he had been doing for 20 years. He formed first political party, opposition party in New York City called the Chinese Justice Party, and that's still in existence. Now, he's been promoting Chinese democracy and freedom for Chinese people. In 1989, during the Tiananmen student movement, he tried to enter China to support the student there, but he was denied entry. In 1998, he was successfully entered China with the intention to form the in-country opposition party, but he was expelled. He became Christian in 1989 after witnessing what happened at Tiananmen Square. So then what happened to my brother, Bing Zhang? In 2002, He was kidnapped while traveling in Vietnam, another country, but he was abducted by secret Chinese police and dragged into China and subsequently charged with two accounts: espionage, that is spying for Taiwanese government, and terrorism. He was accused to bomb a Chinese embassy in Thailand. Over that, since he was sentenced, we have done many efforts to free him. Both United Nations, UK government, and USA and Canada issued a statement and a resolution asked Chinese to release him. The most important thing what we have done is that in 2009 we obtained Royal Thai Police Chief's testimony saying that he did not do any terrorism act in Thailand. More importantly, the charge that he was passing information to Taiwan government, that charge were totally fabricated, and in 2013 we obtained Taiwanese government official statement saying that my brother did not do any espionage for Taiwanese government. So we're here to ask everyone to pray for him. He has been studying a Holy Bible. He just wrote a book. The title is the Secret of the Holy Bible and the Constitution. So he's studying God's words in jail with intention of waking up Chinese people, besides concept of freedom, justice, but more importantly, as a Chinese people, to believe in God. So that's what he had been doing, and that's what the driving force. Now he's still surviving in jail. Although he's 70 years old, he suffered 3 strokes and severe Philippines with Białystok problem. So we're here to plead everyone, as I said, pray for him, and I will ask Dr. Belder and other EU Parliament members to pass a resolution to ask the Chinese government to release him immediately and conditionally on medical and humanitarian reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We shall do our utmost to have it on our urgency on the violations of human rights.
That would be great.
We will propose, and it's not an easy task, we will be honest, but we will do our best for it. Then I turn to the lady on my left side. We managed to have indeed a resolution on her husband, Li Mingche, and now I give the floor to the testimony of his wife, Xin Yu Li.
主席，各位午安。Dr. Belder, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. 我是李明哲的太太李静瑜。I'm the wife of Li Mingzhe, Li Jingyu. 我的先生过去是台湾的劳工运动者。My husband worked in labor rights back in Taiwan. 也曾经任职过台湾的民主进步党。And also worked at Taiwan's DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party. 他在2012年离开民主进步党之后，开始关注中国的人权。He started paying attention to China's human rights issues after he left the DPP back in 2012. 他在2012年开始在台湾透过网络跟中国的网友分享台湾的民主运动经验。Starting from that year, he started sharing with Chinese people through online Chinese social media Taiwan's history transforming from a dictatorship to a democracy. 他还同时管理一个公益基金。He also managed a justice fund. 这个公益基金成立的目的是在金钱援助中国偏乡地区的政治受难者家庭。 aiming to financially aid family members of political prisoners who experience financial hardship.
这些政治受难者家庭是尚未获得关注的一群。对。
These family members of political prisoners, they have yet to receive international support or attention.
他们往往因为家人受到逮捕之后，全家的生计陷入困境。
And very often, after a member of their family gets arrested, the whole family experiences financial hardship.
我的先生所做的仅仅是这样微小的人道救援跟台湾民主经验的分享。
My husband's work has consisted only of sharing Taiwan's history of democratization and humanitarian rescue.
2017年3月19号，我的先生从澳门入境中国，随即失联。
My husband disappeared on 2017's March 19th after he entered Macau.
之后，他被中国以颠覆国家政权罪判处5年。
He was later sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment with the charge of inciting subversion of state power.
他目前被移往中国湖南省的赤山监狱。
He's currently at Hunan's Chishan Jail.
我的先生跟目前其他中国政治犯的案件的不同，在于我的先生是一个台湾人，是一个外国人，他不是中国籍的人士。
The difference between the case of my husband and other cases of the cases of other Chinese human rights prisoners is that he is a foreigner. He's a Taiwanese. He's not a Chinese citizen.
中国用这样的方式将我先生逮捕，并且以中国人的身份将他治罪，这是令人无法接受的。
It is unacceptable that China has arrested my husband in such way and has trialed him as a Chinese citizen.
中国试图以李明哲的事件警告全部的台湾人，恐吓。
China is trying to terrorize all the people of Taiwan through his case.
甚至于在恐吓所有全世界要关注中国人权的境外 NGO 工作者。
They're also trying to terrorize all the foreign NGO workers who pay attention to China's human rights issues.
中国还企图要透过李明哲的事件，再一次向全世界强调，中华民国台湾是中国的领地。
China is also trying to, through Li Mingzhe's case, tell the world again that the Republic of China, Taiwan, is a part of China, the People's Republic of China.
这个是全部的台湾人都无法接受的。
This is something that the Taiwanese people will not be able to accept.
我相信也是国际社会所无法接受的。
I believe that the international community will also be unable to accept such thing.
两岸关系由于陷于冰冻，这使得我的政府在援救一个被拘禁于中国的国民显得格外的困难。
Due to the fact that the cross-strait relations between Taiwan and China are currently frozen, my government has experienced hardship trying to rescue its citizen that is currently incarcerated in China.
这也就是国际救援在李明哲的这个事件当中显得格外重要的原因。
This is the reason why international rescue is extremely important for my husband's case.
也是我今天来此跟各位求助的主要原因。
This is also the main reason why I'm here today to plead for help from you.
所以我有一些请求。
Therefore, I would like to plead for.
请你们运用你们的影响力，向中国表达你们支持言论自由，释放李明哲。
For the EU, for the EU Parliament to tell the Chinese authorities that you support the freedom of speech and would like them to release Li Mingzhe.
第二个，在李明哲被释放之前，请确保我的家属探视权。
before Li Mingjia is released, I would like to have the right to visit him.
请关注李明哲对外的通讯权。
And please pay attention to Li Mingjia's right to communicate with the outside world.
我请求能够让李明哲在狱中阅读所有任何中国出版的书籍。
I would like Li Mingjia to be able to read anything that is any books or publications that were published by Chinese publishers.
最后，请持续关注李明哲的看病权。
Lastly, please pay attention to Li Mingjia's right to medical attention.
特别是在中国发生过刘晓波在狱中因癌症过世的消息之后，
Especially after I heard about Mr. Liu Xiaobo's death in China, in the prisons of China, due to cancer.
谢谢大家。
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your strong testimony, and of course we will follow closely the situation of your husband in the European institution, and we will surely not forget his name and his plight. Then I want to give the floor to you. Can you introduce yourself, and can you also give a statement, dear friend?
Thank you, Dr. Balder. Thank you, Boba Fu. So my name is Omar Kanat. I'm the director of the Uyghur Human Rights Project, a advocacy-based human rights organization based in Washington D.C. and also I'm the executive chairman of the World Uyghur Congress. So the repression in terms of religion and human rights in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region that we call East Turkestan is beyond the imagination. Especially after the new party secretary took office in East Turkestan, the Xinjiang, he turned East Turkestan to a police state with millions of security cameras, and he banned the language, Uyghur language, as language of instruction in all schools. Now there is no Uyghur language teachings in all East Turkestan, and also banned the religion and culture for Uyghurs to practice and enjoy. So the Uyghurs practically banned to practice their religion. And he put, according to moderate estimates, from 800,000 to 1 million Uyghurs in so-called re-education camps. So it is very well documented that in these re-education camps, people are being killed, dead in custody are happening in this re-education. There are many cases of death in custody in re-education camps, and torture. So the first thing that people forced to do in the re-education camp is to denounce the religion. And people, Uyghurs, are being sentenced to long time imprisonment for participating in a religious ceremony in 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Especially since the spring of 2017, China has incarcerated, as I say, about 800 to 1 million Uyghurs in re-education camp. These re-education camps are the reintroduction of Gulag prison system. We thought had ended with the fall of the Soviet Union. Uyghurs are imprisoned not for some alleged crime, but for ideological, political, and religious reasons. The Chinese authorities forced even to imams to talk to the streets and dance and sing songs praising the Chinese Communist Party. And all mosques are now under Chinese strict control, and thousands of mosques are demolished during last one and a half year. The Uyghurs are arbitrarily deprived of their liberty for merely being Uyghurs. Evidence has revealed the extensive nature of these new gulags. Chinese authorities are holding nearly, about some estimates, nearly 10% of the Uyghur population in these re-education camps. Recently, a Chinese official in Kashgar acknowledged that as many as 120,000 Uyghurs are being held in so-called re-education camps only in Kashgar prefecture, only a province of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Poor conditions in China's gulags has been documented. A January 2018 report described how overcrowding at a camp in Kurla was causing health problems among the inmates. Also in January 2018, the Uyghur community received word from the relative of Muhammad Salih Hajim, a 82-year-old Quranic scholar and Uyghur religious leader, that he had died while jailed in re-education camp. He was very well-respected Uyghur religious figure, and he was the one who, by the request of the Chinese government, translated Quran from Arabic into Uyghur language. In December 2017, two young Uyghurs forcibly returned from Egypt, Abdul Salam Mehmet and Yasin Jan, died while in detention. In April 2018, 34-year-old Abdul Ghaffur Abdul Jabbar died after 6 months of incarceration. Chinese authorities have targeted 5 categories of suspicious Uyghurs for political indoctrination, including those who live or travel overseas and Uyghurs who have relatives abroad. In 2017, Egyptian authorities returned Uyghur students at the behest of China. Those students returned from Egypt have been sent to the gulags. One student who visited his family in East Turkestan during his studies in the United States was held for 17 days and threatened with retaliation against his family members if he spoke up about his experience. Buzainafo Abdurashidi, a student forcibly returned from Egypt, a female student, is detained incommunicado. Reports indicate she was handed a 7-year jail sentence after a secret trial. China's Gulag prison system puts it in violation of a number of international human rights norms, including those established in the International Convention for Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance and International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. Today we demand from the Chinese government answers about the arbitrary detention of thousands of Uyghurs. We demand to know the whereabouts of our friends and family members and call on responsible citizens and governments and agencies to pressure China into accountability for this gross violation of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the upcoming report, there should be given attention, close attention to what's happening in Xinjiang and the situation.